Welcome back to the 5-5 Sports Podcast. I'm Aviva Mirsky, here as always with Evan Rutenberg and Matthew Choi. We have a big show for you today as we break down the NFL Divisional Round. Let's get right into it with the Packers versus the Rams. What were your thoughts on this game?
Vintage Aaron Rodgers. He looked great. The chemistry between him and Devontae Adams is, continued to be on display throughout the year. And against the Rams, there's definitely not a better QB wide receiver duo in the league because they both complement each other so well. And Aaron Rodgers, the MVP, he's been the best QB all year, which in turn has made Devontae Adams, whether you view him as a top three talent at wide receiver, wherever you want to put him talent-wise, he has been the best receiver as a whole because of Aaron Rodgers this season. He makes everyone around him better. The defense has been phenomenal. We've been talking a lot about Aaron Rodgers and how impressive he's been. He's a shoo-in MVP simply because of the success they've had on offense. But Green Bay isn't the number one seed without that defense. They're playing well on all sides of the ball. Secondary has been phenomenal, with Jair Alexander being the standout player throughout the entire year. But you saw the linebackers get involved. Was Zadarius Smith being the most present guy. They were getting Jared Goff early and often. And that was really the recipe for the Green Bay Packers. And that was really where the success started. Starts from top to bottom in Green Bay, and they're a dangerous team. And they have to Tampa Bay is going to be a tough challenge, but Green Bay just looks like the most determined team, and this is most kind of impressive Aaron Rodgers-led Green Bay team we've seen in probably at least 5-6 years.
Yeah, I think you said pretty much all there. And I think of all the games we saw this weekend, I think that's the way this game turned out was kind of how most were predicted it, with Green Bay winning. And look, Rams, they have a great defense, but Green Bay's offense isn't an offense you really stop. It's an offense you need to outscore to win because you simply aren't going. It's going to be really hard to stop Aaron Rodgers, and that's pretty much what they failed to do. They tried to contain him, but Rams, again, they have good defense. Aaron Donald may have been a bit injured, but regardless, they weren't going to stop Aaron Rodgers from scoring. And they weren't going to stop the offense overall. And like you said, they both played well on both ends of the field. They played well defensively. They stopped Jared Goff when they need to. Jared Goff, even though he wasn't 100% healthy, Jared Goff didn't have the worst game of the season. But that being said, he didn't get to do much because that offense was contained as a whole. And because that Packers are proving while Aaron Rodgers is the number one guy, is the reason why they're this far. They have a good team this season to really back Rodgers up and to actually help him get to that Super Bowl again.
Yeah, I mean, it's a time of the same, and you're nothing without a great QB in football. QB and coach are both, equally important, and I think Matt LaFleur also deserves a lot of credit. He got, I think, a little bit of stick last year because no matter what, the expectation with the Green Bay Packers to be 1 or 2, and I think they were the 2 seed last year, maybe not the 1 seed. I think they were the 2 seed. Then they had to go to San Francisco, and we all know what happened there. Well, I think Matt LaFleur does get a lot of credit because he got some stick last year because of the way they lost to the 49ers. But this year, I mean, it's just been a faultless team, and I think we were clearly harsh on Matt LaFleur. If you were one of his critics, I was okay with the job he done. I thought they played well, but they still had some weaknesses on defense, but clearly that's been figured out. I mentioned Zadarius Smith, a linebacker, the other guy that was all over the place for Green Bay was Preston Smith. He had such an impact on that game. He didn't allow Cam Akers any breathing room, and they really shut down any sort of running game from the get-go from the Rams. The Rams didn't have much offense. The Rams are definitely limited with Jared Goff. He's almost more of a game manager. He's a good QB, but from what we've seen throughout his entire career, it's hard to kind of classify him as something special with the expectations.
He's a QB, but he can't take over a game.
Exactly, and
Sean McVay gives him a good system, but
Sean McVay is definitely a big reason for the Rams' success, the creativity that he brings to that offense. But when you play a great defense and when Jared Goff is limited, and then you don't have your number one receiver in Cooper Kupp, a lot of factors are going against the Rams. So it felt like the Packers' day. The offense was clicking. It wasn't a perfect display from the Green Bay Packers, but you rarely see a perfect 4 quarters from any football team ever. Yeah. You just don't see it. But credit to Green Bay, they're the better team. Now they move on to Tampa. They move on to Tom Brady and Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where they will be favorites, and
Yeah.
it should be an exciting game nonetheless.
Completely agree with that.
Okay, so moving on, we have the Ravens versus the Bills, with the Bills moving on. Matthew, I will let you start with your reaction as a Ravens fan.
I mean, I thought I was gonna come on the podcast and start like ranting for like 20 minutes because of like how bad that game was. But I think since I had like time to process it, I'll actually say the goods and the bad of that game. I think honestly the only good thing to come from it was our defense. I think I said last week, if we do win this game, it would be because of our defense and if our offense does just enough. Unfortunately, that second part didn't happen, but our defense really did step up. Josh Allen, like we are able to like contain Josh Allen. You know, he still got a touchdown. Like you're not gonna completely shut down like a great quarterback like Josh Allen, but we did our best to contain him, and I don't think the score was really reflective of how well our defense played that game. That being said, I'm not going to defend Lamar Jackson on this podcast because he did. It's simple as that. He didn't play a good game. Like, he didn't play to caliber that you would expect him to. And yeah, after that pick six was probably like that like nail in the coffin of the game. And would I've liked to see him come back and maybe try to make up for his mistake in the fourth quarter, obviously. But again, he got injured, didn't happen, and at that point, like I don't think anyone expected for Ravens to actually win at that point. Even though Huntley was like, even when he was making passes, I didn't expect Huntley to like come back and allow the Ravens to come back. I think the only criticism I give to our defense is that we should try to force more turnovers, which we failed to do. But of course, that's more credit to the Bills' offense because they have been playing well all season. I would say the thing about Lamar Jackson is that for next season, we need to get him better weapons. I mean, we've been saying all year, and apart from Mark Andrews, we really have no one to consistently be a target for him. In terms of Lamar Jackson, like, look, I think people are overblowing how much Ravens fans expect from Lamar Jackson a bit. Like, I don't think you talk about how Lamar you see it as overrated. I don't think it's really the fans that overrate. I think at this point fans know what we're getting from Lamar Jackson. We know what he can and can't do. I think that the media may be overrating him quite a bit because of like how much they center like conversations around him. But I think as a Ravens fan, I think it's fair to say that we know what we're expecting, and we know that although he has a talent, we need to build a better like supporting like group around him. Because simple as that, I think you and I can agree. He is known to throw to, and he has known to help him grow in this game as a passer. Because what I've been saying about Lamar Jackson for the last few years is he's still young and he deserves the time to grow as a QB, and he doesn't currently have the weapons that allow him to do that. So I'm not gonna like, even though Lamar played a bad game, I'm not gonna say that I'm worried about his future as a Ravens QB because I do think that he will grow as a quarterback. And I think we've already seen him grow because, I mean, the whole narrative before was that he'll never win a playoff game. He passed that, and now what we need to see from him is how much further he can go. And one of the things I heard is the new story people are making is Lamar, yeah, he can win a playoff game now, but he can't win when it really matters, which I think is a load of crap because every game in the playoff matters. You know, in the NFL, it's not like hockey where you lose one game, you can still make up for it. Every playoff game in the NFL is do or die. So to say that Lamar can't win when it matters, that doesn't really work because we are seeing that he can. And now we need to see, now that he lost another one after that, we need to see where he goes from here. So I'm not saying Lamar played good by any means, but I think we need to really evaluate how we can help him improve.
Yeah, the headline is definitely misleading. You know, Lamar can't win when it matters. I mean, forget even every playoff game. Every regular season game matters in the NFL. It's only 17, and you know, unless you're like 10-1 and you're shooing number one seed, and the rest of those games don't matter. But you know, for all intents and purposes, every NFL game matters. There's really no room for error. I'd say for Baltimore, just going into weaknesses on that team, you said it's definitely wide receiver. Marquise Brown's a 2 or 3 guy at best. He's definitely not a number one guy, and you can't have Willie Snead and Miles Boykin being the two guys complementing him. That just doesn't make sense. You're never going to win consistent playoff games with that wide receiver core. But the big problem is number one receivers are hard to find. There's not really a top 10 wide receiver that's going to become a free agent, and there's definitely not going to be one coming to Baltimore. So that's going to be definitely an area of concern for Baltimore, how they address it. They'll definitely be getting someone in free agency, or they'll be drafting receiver. But again, wide receivers, they're easier to come by, but getting a number one guy that's, a guy in the kind of range of Devontae Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, Julio Jones when he was really in his prime. Those are kind of rarities, and just guys that are as dominant at that position. And it feels like Baltimore really needs that. I mean, when you look at the rest of the team, there really isn't a flaw. Defensively, there is no flaw. D-line, fantastic. Great corners, great safeties. Linebackers have done an exceptional job this year. Even the rookies, the rookie Patrick Green, he's been great all year. And on your D-line, Matthew Judon's been phenomenal all year. Yeah. Calais Campbell has been the big signing, who's definitely had an impact. Derek Wolfe was getting in on the action for a lot of parts in key moments against the Bills. But again, it's a matter of Lamar Jackson's inability to throw the ball, and it's been an issue in the regular season, and it's continued in the playoffs. It's so hard to win with a QB that can't throw. And the reason that Lamar is as good as he is because of his legs. But the question is, how sustainable is it? And, Baltimore has a lot of free agents coming up. So they're going to have to tie some guys down. To me, it feels like Baltimore, as hard as it is for me to say, because I know how much you love this team, as much as I love the Dallas Cowboys, but it feels like you guys are on a slightly downward trajectory next year. It feels like you may lose some people. You definitely have to address, your wide receiver options. Mark Andrews is a top 3 tight end in the league. It's really Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, and Waller. Those are kind of the 2-3 guys, wherever you want to put those two. But when I look at Baltimore, I look at the roster, and when I look at everything going on, it feels like you guys are in a tough division. You guys are kind of at the peak right now, and you may fall back a year or two and then get back up as Lamar Jackson keeps developing, but he has to develop some sort of, downhill threat. He has to have a consistent ability to hit the deep ball. And right now, that's non-existent in Baltimore's offense. So that's one area that you definitely have to fix up. And the Bills played a great game on defense. The Ravens defense limited the Buffalo offense to 10 offensive points. 7 of the points came from pick 6 in the third quarter. So I think the scoreline is reflective on how well Baltimore's defense played, because they only gave up 10 points. But Baltimore's offense only put up 3, and that's where the game was won and lost. It's really as simple as that, looking at that game specifically.
Yeah, and what you said about the Ravens facing like downward trajectory, honestly, you're not wrong on that. But I think our defense is going to still come back strong. Our defense, ignoring the current roster, our defense for Ravens have never been a concern. They've always had a consistently strong defense, and I think the team likes building around a strong defense foundation.
Yep.
But if we don't find more help towards for the Ravens offense, it's not that we're going to get worse. It's just that as our teams get better, we are going to struggle to compete with them, because we just don't have that firepower to outscore our teams. We could stop our teams, but like I said, there's 2 ways to win. One of them is to shut down the team's offense, but when that can happen, you have to be able to outscore them. Ravens, if the first option's gone, they just don't have the ability to do the second thing.
Quickly before we go on to the next game, just the difference between the teams is really the quarterbacks. When you look at Lamar Jackson stats, 14 for 24, 162 yards. Josh Allen 23 for 37 for 206. It was all passing for Buffalo, and that's kind of what we saw with Kansas City. Their offense is kind of leaning towards a lot toward the pass. Green Bay is premier pass team. They do have that threat with Aaron Jones. Buffalo has just no threat from running back. Devin Singletary and TJ Yeldon had 9 carries combined with a total of 29 yards. So they really weren't rushing the ball. And the Ravens are kind of a premier rush team. But if you don't get a lead early and you can't kill the clock, then that's when you see the Ravens struggle. So they have to find a way to win from behind. They're great when they're ahead, when they're playing from ahead, when they can control the clock, when they have an effective run game behind that offensive line, they win games. But when it doesn't happen, if they trail early, that's when they tend to struggle. So that's going to be the key to kind of moving into the next into the next level if you're a Baltimore Ravens fan. And until we see that, it's hard to kind of consider them an actual threat to win the Lombardi Trophy at the end of the year.
I want to say this. I think the saying that Lamar can't throw, I think that's a bit misleading.
He can throw. When I say it's compared to the elite quarterbacks, even to mediocre quarterbacks. If you're ranking Lamar Jackson, his throwing ability compared to the other 30 quarterbacks in the league, where does he rank? Bottom 10?
What I mean about that is he's not a good pocket passer, but when he's able to escape, run out of the pocket, he is able to make big plays. But that being said, during those plays, he doesn't have room to get out away from the defense, and that's when the pressure comes onto him. That's when he can't throw.
You have to be a pocket passer. All the great QBs are pocket passers. Look at Drew Brees and Tom Brady. They made a living throwing from the pocket. They can scramble. Yeah, having that ability, and we've seen with guys like Watson and Wilson over the last 5 years. And now we're seeing Kyler Murray, guys like Tua, these mobile QBs that are able to do that. But you also need to be able to throw from the pocket, because a quarterback makes his living in the pocket, sitting there assessing the field, making the right plays, and we haven't seen that from Lamar Jackson yet. Are we in the third year? This is now the end of the third year.
His second full season, third season.
So it's about taking the next step for Lamar Jackson. Yeah. The NFL is a cruel world. You'll be criticized every game you play. So again, we've been talking about it, endlessly on this podcast. He needs to take that next step.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
And I think it's as simple as that. He needs to learn how to throw from the pocket.
Okay, moving on. Next, we have the Browns versus the Chiefs. Chiefs move on to the AFC final once again. What stood out in this one?
Andy Reid has balls. He said in his press conference that going for it was the only option. And when you look at it, he's probably right. You don't want to give Cleveland the chance to end it. You put faith in your entire team. And we've seen Andy Reid put faith in his team throughout the years, no matter where he's been, whether it's been in Philly, whether it's been in KC. But gutsy call, backup QB, Chad Henne, you could pin them, inside their own 10-yard line, but he went for it and he killed the game. So credit to Andy Reid, gutsy call. But regarding the Chiefs, we saw this last year. The defense, wasn't great in the early season, but in the postseason when they had to make plays, they stepped up, and we saw the Chiefs make a lot of good plays. We'll talk about the controversial hit in the second quarter regarding the touchback when Rashad Higgins fumbled out of the end zone. If you want to touch on that before I do, be my guest. But the Chiefs played a great game on both sides of the ball. They got enough offense from Mahomes and Chad Henne towards the end. But the game was really won and lost in that one play. So credit to Chad Henne. It's not easy to do coming into a playoff game with, not much, football under his belt over the last, 5-6 years. But he did what he had to do. And the big question is Patrick Mahomes going to be healthy for Sunday? That's yet to be determined.
Yeah, I mean, the Chiefs just played smart, and Andy Reid just coached well. They knew that they had to adjust with Mahomes leaving the game, because of course if you're stepping down from Mahomes, it doesn't matter who your backup is, that's a huge drop off. But Andy Reid knew how to use just enough of Henne to keep them in it and to not allow Browns to come back with the ball to make another final run against them. And like I said, the defense stepped up when it mattered. They weren't amazing.
Yeah, it wasn't a perfect display from the defense. Yeah, it wasn't a defensive clinic, but they did play very well, the defense, and it has to be said. They got a lot of pressure to Baker Mayfield, and Cleveland has a good O-line, but they were getting consistent pressure through mainly Frank Clark. But yeah, it was a game of the Chiefs did what they had to do, and all the expectations were on them. Losing Mahomes was never going to be easy, but they still found a way. And Cleveland Browns fans are probably just once again feeling like the opportunities are right there for them, and they could not grab onto it.
In terms of that fumble, like I get the controversy, but this stuff happens in football. It's part of the game. These things, and when I saw it, the first thing I thought was, this is the most Browns thing I've ever seen, and like if I was a Browns fan, like, I'll be the one complaining about the call. But at the end of the day, this happens in sports, and it's kind of to be expected.
I'm very happy you said that because I'm in total agreement with you. I saw the talk of, were the Cleveland Browns robbed? No, the rule is, clear as day. Whether you like the rule or not, that's a different discussion. But personally, I don't have an issue with the rule. We'll talk. I have that in our rapid fire segment later. But how often does it happen where you fumble out of the end zone? And you always have offensive players, going for the pylon, reaching out, and it's a risk that they're taking. And if you're taking that risk and you fumble it, I have no reason to believe that rule shouldn't or that the rule should change. You're taking the risk, you're trying to get the end zone, and sometimes you have to make a decision: is it worth it to hold back and keep the ball at the 1 yard line or the 2 yard line, or are you going to go for it all on that one play? And backfired. We saw the Oakland Raiders season end a few years ago against the Dallas Cowboys in that crazy game where, I don't know if you remember, where to determine the first down, the ref put the piece of paper to in between the football and the stick to see if it was a first down. But now in the game, the Raiders lost the ball outside of the end zone, and that season ended in Week 16. It's a rule that I have no issue with, and some people do, but they weren't robbed because the rule is a rule, and it was clear as day that he fumbled it outside the end zone. It was close, but I have no issue with it.
I can agree with that.
Okay, so the final game was the Saints versus the Buccaneers, with Brady and the Bucs moving on. How did you guys react to this one?
I'll be honest, I was kind of sad watching this game. Just I've never said this before, but like, when I first started watching football, of course I was a Ravens fan, but like I think when one of the players that I've started watching outside of Ravens and started following was Drew Brees. So it's kind of seeing him like play the game and really being like a shell of his like former self. Yeah, it was hard to see, and knowing that this might be his last game and ended with this performance. It's kind of a sad moment for the career of Drew Brees. But I think what the takeaway from this game is just how important it is like to have weapons on like an offense, especially with an aging quarterback. Like Brady and Brees, they're the two like oldest quarterbacks like in the league right now, and then they're facing off in the playoffs. And it was just clear as day how much like more the Bucks were able to move the ball forward. And last week I predicted the Saints because I thought the Saints responded well to the Buccaneers for both times they met the season both times they met in the regular season. But I think what the Buccaneers showed is even though Saints may have a response to him, there's just more they can do in the Saints offense. There's just more. They have so many more options. Like it's easier to figure out the Saints offense, and if that's exactly what the Buccaneers defense was able to do, allowing their offense to play better. Like to be fair, Brady did not have a lights out game. He had a pretty average game for Tom Brady, but it was just enough for him and for the offense to surpass what the Saints were able to do. And I'll say this about the Saints. With Drew Brees retiring, like I think this is fair to say that like this is pretty much like the end to the era of the Saints, unless they require like a star quarterback in the off season. But I mean, most players have dropped off the season. Like not even if, like marginally, it's been in the second half of the season. It's been a bit of a decline, so it's going to be interesting to see like how they move forward from this because they are well coached. They are a strong team. They are like a well built system, but it was clear as day that the Bucks were able to do more offensively, and they just had more. Like I said before, they have more weapons, and this what it shows. Like if you have two great leaders at quarterback, when they're as they age, you need to support them with proper followers or proper team, and they gave that to Brady. Breeze didn't have that.
I don't think it's fair to say that Drew Brees didn't have a good team. I think when you look at it on paper, I think they're one of the more talented teams from top to bottom. I think defensively are definitely carried. I think problem with the
Oh,
Saints
defense is
this
fine.
year.
Also, more offensively, and like I mean,
I
Arden Kamara and
But I
Thomas like,
mean,
have that many
Emmanuel
weapons.
Sanders and I mean, if Michael Thomas is healthy all year, we may have a different discussion. But he was just
Yeah,
ineffective.
yeah.
But I don't think it's a matter of the Saints roster not being talented enough. I think it's a matter of it's a matter of Drew Brees not having enough in the tank. The 4 picks weren't pretty, and that's kind of where the season ended for the Saints.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, you're wrong there. Like, Saints, Breeze, yeah, he's out of. Like I said this before, like again, he's outgassed. Like he's been a shell of his former self. I don't want to say like, I wouldn't say this game damages his legacy as a quarterback by
No,
any
no.
means. Yeah, like he's more than just what's happened this game. I think at a certain point, it's come to
Yeah, I think
expect.
just age got to him.
Yeah,
And Tom Brady still has enough in the tank. It wasn't a vintage Tom Brady performance, a lot of short field, but Tom Brady did what he
he
had to
doesn't do
do. He
enough.
was
He
making he
did
was
enough.
making the right throws, made the right decisions, and the Bucks just they won based on the fact that Tom Brady looked like a QB ready to play in the NFC Championship game. Drew Brees is ready to retire.
Yeah, very true on that.
All right.
Okay. So now, with all that being said, you already made your Super Bowl predictions last week. Has any of them changed?
I mean, mine will change if whether or not how healthy Patrick Mahomes is playing next game, or if he's even playing for that matter. Because I mean, it's Patrick Mahomes. Like I said, it doesn't matter who your backup is. Losing him is just a huge drop off, and the Chiefs aren't going to beat the Bills without him. That being said, if he is playing, if he's healthy, then I'm still taking the Chiefs because with Mahomes, they're the best offensive team in football. And on NFC, that same goes for Packers. Like it's going to come down to one of them, and I still do take the Chiefs to win it all if Mahomes is healthy. That means if he's not healthy, and it's that I do think it'll be the Packers and Bills. In that case, I do believe Packers will win. But if it's the Chiefs and Packers with Mahomes, I'm sticking with the Chiefs.
Yeah, I had Packers Chiefs. I mean, if Mahomes isn't healthy, let's just assume he is. Even then, the Bills are a great team. We saw how good they were defensively against the Ravens. We know the Ravens aren't some prolific offensive team, but both sides of the ball, the Bills are fantastic, and they definitely can expose the Chiefs' defense. Um, with Josh Allen's arm, Josh Allen, we know will be a throwing. They're going to run, very few times. We saw they ran, they gave their running backs less than 10 touches combined. So it's going to be a passing game, and I think, I mean, if Patrick Mahomes plays, bet the over because that game should just scream points. But yeah, I think the Packers have more than the Buccaneers. I just think with Aaron Rodgers kind of looking as good as he has, Tom Brady isn't as good as we've seen Tom Brady. He's been slightly limited. Whether that's age, whether that's not being under Bill Belichick, probably slight combination of both. He's had a fantastic year. Let's not take anything away from what Tom Brady's done because he's still done what Tom Brady's
Tom
done
Brady's
throughout
not
his
the point.
career.
He's at the point of his career where he was surprising him. Like we know what we're getting
Yeah,
from Tom Brady.
I mean, he's not, going to be throwing bombs like Rodgers or Mahomes. He's not the most talented guy when it comes to, arm strength, but when it comes to accuracy,
Yeah.
it's second to none. Yeah, I just think Green Bay has more because defensively, I think they're a much better team than Tampa Bay, and offensively, they are a better team. So to me, on just both sides of the ball, Green Bay is going to edge it. But Tampa Bay did have some good, defensive performances against the Saints. We saw, Antoine Winfield come up with a sack and an interception.
Yeah.
So he was really kind of the standout player on the Buccaneers defense. But they're young. They're a young defense. Outside of Levante David, the linebackers playing well. The Levante David's been good all year. Devin White's really starting to step up as the season's gone on. Yeah, they do have talent on Tampa Bay, but I think Aaron Rodgers is. We know how smart he is. We know how talented he is. He finds weaknesses. He finds holes. He finds kind of the zone in the defense that he has to throw to, and just it's experience, it's the smarts of Aaron Rodgers, and it's the way they're playing that I have. To me, I see no reason to change my pick of Green Bay winning it all. It's just it feels like Aaron Rodgers' year. It feels like destiny. Tampa Bay going into Lambeau, 43-year-old Tom Brady in the cold. I don't like that. I think Green Bay is a lot more likely to win than the Chiefs are when you look at the favorites. But I think both games will be close till the end. I think Green Bay will pull away. I think Kansas City Buffalo's coming down to the final snap.
Oh, sorry. I thought Choi still had more to say. Anyway. Okay, so moving on to basketball. As always, I will ask, what were your thoughts on this past week of the Raptors?
I'd say the one thing that's really stood out has been Chris Boucher. Aaron Baines has done nothing. It's not, it's not trying to, put down Aaron Baines. We know what he is. He's definitely not looked as good as he could have. We expected a little more production, but we get what we get. It's good that we're seeing Chris Boucher be more productive. He's not going to be like this every week because his shot, from game to game, it's like picking the lottery. You just don't know what you're going to get out of Chris Boucher's 3-point shot, but he is effective inside. He is a presence. He does get a lot of blocks just because of his size, his kind of his reach, and the kind of just the way he's built his frame. He's a very skinny dude, but he's very long, and coupled that being a 7-footer, you should be an effective NBA rim protector. But Chris Boucher, he's been producing offensively a little bit more, and that's kind of why they're on a 3-game win streak. It does help that Charlotte and Dallas aren't very good teams. But, the Raptors won a few close games, blew out Dallas. So, it's looking a little bit better for them. When you look at the standings as a whole, we said the ceiling for this team is like a 7-8 seed. So we'll see if they can get there. And it's going to be kind of a week-to-week thing analyzing this team. But it was better performances as a whole. I think offensively they look pretty good. Defensively, they're looking more as a unit, but they're still going to struggle in a lot of games.
Yeah, it's definitely been a positive turn this last week. But again, the matchups may have been a hard.
Winning 3 in a row is always going to be positive.
Yeah. You take a win regardless.
You got to beat what's in front of you. That's the kind of the old saying. But yeah, they did. So credit to where it's due. They are beating teams that they should.
Yeah, we're winning games that we need to, and that's always a positive sign. I mentioned Chris Boucher has definitely been a highlight for the Raptors. In terms of Aaron Baines, I think he has a problem of trying to fill that role that Ibaka was for us, and he simply is just on a different. Ibaka is just on a different level of what he offered to the team than Baines is. I hope that the Raptors will keep this direction forward and be able to be that fringe playoff team, because I still, even despite how horrible they look at the beginning of the season, I still believe that that's the type of team that they are. They aren't going to stay near the bottom of the East for that long. They are going to go up there. Question is, what will the road to look like? Like, how shaky will they look in these games? Like, how much will the key players like Van Vliet and Siakam be able to hold the team together? And Siakam looked better than he did early in the season, because in the early season he looked like how he did back in the bubble, but which was, we fair to say, that was pretty bad. But yeah, I think we have to keep an eye on the Raptors to see exactly how far they can take it this season, because this is definitely the weakest Raptors team we've seen in a while. And we want now curious to see, can Nick Nurse coach their way into a playoff spot?
Yeah, it's just the lack of depth, and Siakam isn't not playing consistently at a high enough level. Yeah. His shot's so off. It's even if he scores a few, he'll have some shots where it's like front rim, side of the bag. It's some shots Siakam takes are ugly, and he's not a consistent 3-point shooter, which is very important in today's NBA. One guy I'm saying that's really struggling when we talk about depth and the Raptors just not having it this year, Norman Powell has to step up, because Norman Powell has had a lot. He's had a lot of bad games this year. He almost looks disinterested. He looks like I don't know, he doesn't want to be playing basketball right now, so he kind of has to figure out that groove and become that streaky player off the bench that we've seen Norman Powell that we've seen he can be. Unfortunately, we're not seeing that early on in the year, and that's hurting the Raptors. Again, you said losing Serge Ibaka, of course, it's going to hurt. But yeah, there's really a lack of depth. When you look at the bench, it's not great. There aren't really good options you could put on, so that's really where they're limited. So yeah, if the Raptors want to be a 7-8 seed, you don't necessarily have to be good teams. You don't have to look good against teams that are going to be contenders. You just have to beat the bad teams and the teams that are on your level. You have to play well against those teams. You have to win those games in order to give yourself a chance to be in the playoffs. And If they can, then we'll maybe be having a different discussion than we are than what we've had over the last couple of weeks. But again, it's a watch process with the Raptors. We'll see how they progress over the year, and it's early. There's still plenty of basketball to be played. We'll see where they are, in a week's time.
As for the rest of the league, what has impressed you guys with them?
I'd say Luka Doncic against the Bulls. Like that was his triple double that game. Like each season we see Doncic stepping up more and more into that role as like the face of the NBA. He's definitely a generational talent, and I mean he was one of the people we talked about as like top MVP contenders earlier in the season, and I think both of us would stick by that because he's just been so dominant this entire season so far, and I think anything that the Mavericks does well, it's going to be surrounding how well he plays and like because of what he offers to the team.
I'll give two guys. I'm not whenever we do this segment, I usually like to avoid superstars. I like to talk about kind of guys that are just playing well that deserve recognition. I'm going to go two big men this week: Miles Turner and Vucevic. Quickly on Miles Turner, he's had struggles the last 2 years. Whether it's with his shot, whether it's with his production, but we saw in his rookie year how good of a threat he could be. Inside defending that paint. Because I think he was a league leader in blocks in his rookie year, and he kind of had all those expectations on him, and he didn't deliver over the last 2 years. But this year, he's really starting to kind of regain that form. He's a big part of Indiana's success. I'd have to say he's been their best player, especially now losing Oladipo. Brogdon hasn't been, he hasn't been firing this year, like we've seen Brogdon be able to do. I think Miles Turner is the reason Indiana is as good as they are. No TJ Warren as well, we have to remember. So Miles Turner is really carrying the load. And Vucevic, he's been doing it for years. But we never seem to talk about Vucevic because he's on Orlando. But where would that team be without him? His threes, his offense, his defense, his abilities to kind of create his own offense. It's not really underrated anymore because we all know how good Vucevic is. He's a lot more respected in the league, but he's been phenomenal player this year.
I would say
he's been doing it.
He's a French superstar player.
Yeah, so he's been doing it for a while now. We just never talk about the Magic. We never talk about Orlando, but Vucevic has been a top 3 big man this year. So credit to him for kind of being the guy in a team that's not very good over the consistent period of time.
Okay, so moving on to the NHL, with the start of this season and the Leafs season, what are your thoughts on their first 4 games?
I don't really want to judge the Leafs the first 4 games. I mean, they look bad against Ottawa, but 3 wins is 3 wins. The one thing I'll say, their penalty kills look very good. There were 2 PKs against Winnipeg in the third period where I was thinking maybe they were going to give up a goal. That's when they looked shaky, couldn't give up the puck, giving up a few chances. But that happens on some power plays. But I think overall, as a whole, the PKs look very good. They haven't had too many power play opportunities. I think they've had more time on the penalty kill, if I'm not mistaken. But I'd say overall, the big concern is always defense and kind of killing penalties for the Leafs. And so far, they've done that at a fairly effective rate. So we'll see if that carries on. And then I'll say quickly on TJ Brody as a new signing. Again, I think he started slow, but over the last 2 games, he's played really well against Ottawa and Winnipeg. In the latter half of the Ottawa home-to-home, the home-and-home series. So, hopefully he continues to be a guy that you could pair with Morgan Riley and you start to build a defense, because over the last years, it's really only been Morgan Riley as a standout guy. Jake Muzzin's being the more defensive guy, but he's had some issues, whether he's not the best skater. He's prone to making some errors on the defensive side of the puck, but I'd say TJ Brody, after the first 2 games, has had a bright last 2 games. So hopefully that continues.
Yeah, I think, like you said, you can't it's not a lot you can judge in the first 4 games, but the PK has been looking good. I think the biggest concern right now, I'd say, is honestly goaltending, because Freddie has not been looking consistent.
No, I think Freddie always starts slow, but he was great against Winnipeg. He shut the door on. He shut the door on everything. And the second game against Ottawa, I wasn't too concerned about Freddie.
He lets in a few goals that should not be let in, though.
It happens. When Freddie's on, he is a top 5 goalie in the league. He always starts the season out so, but I don't think it's been as so as we've seen from Freddie. Again, it's 4 games in. Goalies,
It's hard to judge
they
fully.
have streaks. We saw, the other day, your boy Carter Hart got chased. It happens. We're not going to say he's not a great goalie, but goalies have off games. It's not an easy job to be a great goalie in the NHL. So I'm not. Freddie Anderson is not even a concern for me 4 games in, because he faces about 500 shots a game. So he's ought to let in a few ugly ones once in a while.
A player that I think I want to look out for more throughout the season. Like, I mean, of course, we're always going to look at for a player because he's one of the stars on the team. But I think you need to keep a close eye on Marner, because I think this season he has so much to prove. Because last season was his contract year where he got paid over $10 million, and he did not have a good year last season. And in the bubble, he was even worse. He was invisible for the most part. So I think this season he has to really prove that he's worth what he's being paid. He got paid over $10 million. He has the A on his jersey, and nothing what he did last season really reflected anything that deserves that. So this season, he has to prove people wrong, because I'm one of the people who believe that Marner is the talented player that I'll at least want him to be. But I just don't think we've seen fully enough of it yet. And I think we can this season. I want him to prove people wrong. And because we already know what Matthews is about. We already know what. I think Tavares will also need to kind of step up a little bit too, because he didn't have a great season last year. But I think with the person that needs to show more is Marner. He has to take that step forward as a player, as a superstar in the league, because that's what he kind of needs to be.
Yeah, the Leafs, pressure is always going to be on the 4 offensive guys. Matthews is, always going to be the best player, most consistent, most talented. It's Matthews. I think Nylander started out bright. I think he's had a good start to the year. I think he's looked quick. He's looked fresh. I think creating chances. Marner, outside the 2, basically empty nets. One was, a tap in off the Justin Hall shot, where he really had nothing to. It would be harder to miss than to score on that one than the empty net. So I mean, I think at times Marner's looked a bit slow. The first step hasn't been there, or the passing been a little bit off. He hasn't looked as sharp. If you get that sharpness and that quickness back, then Marner will actually look like the Marner that we saw when he got paid $10 million. So hopefully, yeah, again, 4 games in, we're not going to talk too much about this. We'll move on. But yeah, Marner's looked a bit slow. Hopefully he picks that up. He picks up that sharpness, that, that game quickness that is the NHL, and that kind of that alertness you need if you want to be producing consistently in this league.
Because he's a player that needs to produce that much. Because
he's paid to do that. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, we talk about Nylander. And Nylander is playing as well. He's being paid. He's playing better than he's getting paid right now. Marner is a little off of that, and he needs to step forward.
Okay, so moving on to the final segment of the not so rapid fire fun thing. You each have 30 seconds, and I will cut you off at 30 and warn you at 25. Okay. No timer. No stopwatch. Okay. Does the NFL need to change the touchback rule when an offensive player is outside of the end zone?
No, we already said this. It's a rule that some people are not going to like, some people hate it, and that's fine. The NFL doesn't change it. I don't have an issue with it. Some people say it's like the one rule that they hate the most in sports. To me, that surprised me a little bit. I think brings just a different element to the NFL, and it's kind of that craziness. And with regards to the helmet, I mean it's the final yard. There's going to be contact in the end zone. It's the NFL, and I think there's even more shoulder to helmet. And I don't have an issue with the hit. Some Cleveland Browns will have a problem with it, but that's their problem.
Yeah, I have. They don't need to change it, because I have no issue with it. It's what happens in football. Like there will be moments that you hate as a fan, but that's part of sports as a whole. Not everything's going to work out as you want to, and they've had this rule for a long time. No reason to change it now.
Okay. Is Robert Saleh a good fit long-term for the Jets?
Saleh, right? Robert Saleh.
Say that again?
Is it Saleh?
Saleh.
Right. It's Saleh, yeah.
Sorry. Is Robert Saleh a good fit long-term for the Jets?
it feels like the Jets needed a defensive guy that's going to bring that intensity. And we saw, the way the 49ers defense played week in, week out over the last 2 years. The media focused a lot on the job that Robert Saleh was doing along with Kyle Shanahan, and there's a reason for that. The defense has, showed up even, without Jimmy Garoppolo if they had Nick Mullins in there. So I think he definitely deserves the opportunity. I think he's done a great job in San Francisco, and hopefully he brings that, culture shock to the Jets that is definitely needed.
Yeah, I think teams have been running over the Jets all season, and I think they definitely needed a change. And I think Saleh is a good fit because he could improve the areas where Jets are very lacking, which is basically every area, but with defense being one of them.
Okay. Is Arthur Smith a good hire for the Falcons?
It feels like he could be. The Falcons are a bit of an aging squad on offense, maybe outside of Calvin Ridley, Matt Ryan, and, Julio Jones, coming towards the end. They definitely do have to retool offensive line. Todd Gurley isn't, solid running back, but he's not, in that elite category. But he's an offensive guy. He'll hopefully bring in some new ideas, some fresh ideas to that offense, but there definitely needs to be work on defense as well on that team. So they need to bring in hopefully a defensive coordinator, but Atlanta doesn't feel like a threat right now. Arthur Smith isn't going to take them to the next level. At least not yet. Sorry.
You kind of hit the points I want to talk about because I don't think he's a bad hire, but I don't think he's also the perfect hire either because, like you said, he is an offensive guy and is an aging offensive core. But the biggest problem with the Falcons was the defense. And unless they find someone like a good defensive coordinator to really help them improve that, I don't see him providing much to kind of coach this defense to being a playoff caliber team.
Where does Drew Brees rank all time for quarterbacks?
It's going to be a bit controversial, but I don't think he's a top 10 QB of all time. I think a lot of the work I think he's just outside the top 10. I think a lot of people are going to put him in the top 10 because of kind of his resume and his pedigree. He definitely lacked a lot of arm talent. He wasn't very kind of multi-dimensional. He didn't win very often. A lot of the time he just fell short. And when you look at, the all-time greats like QBs, he has all the stats to back it up. But I feel like he was limited in terms of success and overall championships.
I think he's a fringe top 10 player. I think and I don't think he's going to be there for long because I think eventually our quarterbacks will soon surpass him on that top 10 list. But I think for now he is there just because of how much he did throughout his career, how much he kind of dominated throughout his career as that. He's always considered that one of the top quarterbacks in the league from almost every year he was playing, or for a good chunk of his prime. So I just think seeing that he is a fringe top 10 player all the time.
Who wins a Pierre-Luc Dubois Patrick Laine trade?
It depends on what the Blue Jackets are going to return. Obviously, Laine is the bigger player, the bigger name, but Pierre-Luc Dubois does a lot of things well. Defensively as well as offensively. He's a very good two-way player. He definitely has a lot of value. Patrick Laine is kind of like that 50-goal scorer when he's at his best, and he can affect games in so many ways with his shot, just with his offensive ability. But, depending on the haul, Columbus would potentially get, again, this is still hypothetical, but I think that, either team could win that trade. And, honestly, Winnipeg could have the edge if they play their cards right.
Yeah, our team could win the trade, and I'm actually going to say that but if I have to pick, I will give the edge to Winnipeg because I think, although there's no question the offensive talent line it has, I just think that adding Luc Dubois to the Winnipeg will do more for that team than Laine will do to the Blue Jackets. I think Luc Dubois will be just what Winnipeg needs in compared to what Laine does for Blue Jackets to go farther.
Okay. How do I pronounce this next name? Jacob
Voracek.
Voracek?
Voracek.
Okay, that one's easy. Thoughts on Jacob Voracek berating the reporter?
It's a stupid question by the reporter, so I think Voracek has every right to. It's so often that you see these reporters come out with dumb questions just to get a reaction, just to get a soundbite. And I think, the players have every right to call them out on it. We see it happen a lot in the NBA. We see it less in the NHL, but, I have no issue with it. Ask a better question.
I applaud Voracek, especially as someone who knows Mike Saleh and sees what he tweets and the things he writes as a Flyers fan, it's kind of like similar to Austin Matthews with Steve Simmons. Like you enjoy that because you don't like how the reporter writes about your team, and you think it's justified when the player calls them out for the things they put in their articles. So I applaud Voracek 100% on this.
Okay. What can the NBA do to solve the Wizards' COVID crisis?
They have to put the Wizards in their own bubble for. It's been 5 games in a row that it's been postponed, and I don't know when it's ending. I think they have 7 players with COVID. It's not only affecting Washington's schedule. Washington's not a playoff team, but it's affecting all the teams that have to play Washington. So, it's a tough problem, and it's becoming a serious problem for the NBA because when you miss that many games consecutively, it is definitely an issue.
Yeah, no question about it. They need to isolate them. They need to put them in their own bubble and just find a way to contain this and stop it from spreading because it is not looking good on the NBA right now because of how many games are postponing in a row. And NFL went through this as well, but
Not to
I
this
think
extent.
the NBA has a big risk of this getting really bad. So I think they need to really take it carefully.
Quickly on that, I think the NFL had the luxury of it's 1 game a week. The NBA, you're basically playing 4 games a week, so it's definitely more of a challenge. But they do have to figure it out.
Yeah.
Okay. Are the Knicks going to make the playoffs this year?
I want to say yes, and I want to say no. It's just, I have to believe that they won't because the East is deep, and I think the Knicks just aren't there yet. I don't think they shoot as well as a lot of the other teams in the league. I think they will eventually come slightly more down to earth, but I think, they're playing really well. Julius Randle's being, the star. RJ Barrett's playing well. Isaiah quickly has all of a sudden emerged with the loss of Alfred Payne. So the Knicks have things going for them. I just think eventually they're not going to be in the playoffs.
Yeah, credit to them playing the way they've been playing this year so far. But I still take Raptors over them. I still take Miami over them. I don't think Knicks have the team that will really kind of last throughout the whole entire season, despite how well they've been playing. And there's just other teams that will take over them. So not just credit to how they've been playing. I just give more credit to these other teams that haven't been playing as well yet.
Okay, final 2 questions. Biggest threat to the Nets in the East?
Nobody, but it has to be the Boston Celtics. They're just the deepest team. They're, the best coach team. And they do have the talent to possibly, maybe take a game off the Brooklyn Nets. But we talked about it earlier in the year. I said the Brooklyn Nets are going to the finals if they get James Harden, and I'm doubling down on that. I think they're going to win the entire thing. So good luck beating Brooklyn this year.
I'll say that there are many teams that can beat the Nets because I am not sold on this team. And I think here's the thing. I think if it's just Harden and Durant, I think they are the top team. If it's just Kyrie and Durant, they are the top team. I think if you bring in Kyrie and Harden, that's when the team will collapse. They'll make the playoffs. They'll struggle. And I think Boston is, of all the teams that are threat to them, I think Boston is the biggest one. And they are the most talented team that will make the finals over them.
Matthew, we're going to talk about this next week because I'm very disappointed in that response.
Okay. Biggest threat to the Lakers in the West?
Clippers, and it's not even close. The Clippers are the only team that could beat the Lakers, and I think the Clippers, again, I'm going to double down on my prediction. If the Clippers play the Lakers will beat that team. As long as Pandemic P doesn't come out in the playoffs, the Clippers are just deeper. I think adding Serge Ibaka is going to be a big threat to LeBron James and Anthony Davis. I just think they have the defensive tools to cause an upset.
Yeah, I would say honestly, Clippers are a threat to Lakers. I think if it comes down to them, I have the Lakers edge a bit, but that's no discredit to how talented the Clippers are as a team. And I think it'll definitely come down to wire between those two teams. We missed out on seeing them face off last season, but I think that's a matchup we will get in the playoffs this year, and it will be a tough matchup for the Lakers.
Okay, so I think that's about it for today. Thank you for listening to 5-5 Sports. As always, if you like what you are listening to, feel free to subscribe and join us next week. Bye.
See you guys next week.